Hey everyone, so on this week's episode of Make It with Calvin, we're talking about this, which is the flexible octopus model that I found on Thingiverse that I figured, you know what, it's a fun little print to do. Let's do something fun for a change. So let's talk about printing it, slicers, all that good stuff. So let's dive in. Okay, so first things first, I'm really sorry. I thought I had some footage of a time lapse of printing this. Sadly, for some reason, that never got recorded, got deleted by accident. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. I'm not going to worry about that. But let's actually talk about the model itself. Now, as you can see, this is the 100% model, which is, well, it is tiny. It's not a bad thing, though. And honestly, this is a awesome little print for introducing people to 3D printing. Like, well, what can you do with your printer? Because they honestly think that you just print benches with it all day. And it's like, no, I can actually print, if the settings are right, little articulated models like this or things like that. And it's just a fun little thing to have. I'm not going to lie. I definitely am I use my printing for more practical reasons. But when I saw this, I'm like, you know what? It's time to have a little fun here. So that's the main reason why I printed it. Now, one thing that does make this a little bit tricky is the fact that it is a print-in-place model, but thankfully the designer gave some pretty generous tolerances, which works really well. I will say when I printed it, I did have to come along and just gently manipulate the tentacles to break them loose, but it wasn't anything horrible. It takes a minute, it takes a little bit of time. It was perfectly fine. I know some models are designed so that when you print it up, when you take it off the print bed, it's supposed to hang free. I didn't do any of that. I didn't worry about that. Now for the printer and the slicer, I used my Artillery 3D Genius. Only reason why I used that over my X1 is the Genius tends to keep a 0.4 or a 0.25 nozzle in it. This was printed with a 0.4. The X1 tends to keep a 0.6 nozzle in there. Just because that one's bigger, it makes sense to print bigger items, have the smaller printer, print the smaller items. It's the way things go around here. Now, that being said, for the slicer, if anybody knows me from watching any of the streams with me and Jimmy, you'll know that I use Simplify 3D, much to his chagrin. Quite honestly, he's giving me a hard time about it, but no big deal. I did actually print this up using Cura 3.6. Now, the only reason why I did that is because I constantly see people on 3D printing forums. I'm not going to say which forums because that's irrelevant. Going constantly, well, I downloaded the latest version of Cura and everything's gone out the window. Okay, my point is I was trying to show that you can print a model here using an older version of a slicer and it'll work just fine. Now, I'm not saying that the later versions of Cura don't have features that I may or may not want, but the point is, for what I'm doing here, 3.6 got the job done. The only thing that I really care about in it is tree supports, which comes in very handy when I'm doing my train models because I can more easily break out the support from inside of the model. That being said, though, Gyroid Infill is cool as well, but I'm not really into that as much. I really just want tree support, so that's the reason why I have 3.6. That being said, though, yes, if you really wanted this to be perfect, you could go ahead and do that, but for me, it doesn't matter. So this was all well and fun, but I figured, you know what? Let me try printing a bigger one because I was genuinely curious. If I printed a bigger one, would the issue with the tentacles, being slightly stuck after printing stay the same or get, better or worse because the size went up? And quite honestly, it acted exactly the same. It might have taken a little less force to break them apart, but it still took a little bit of force. But I have to say, this big one, this thing's pretty awesome. This one was scaled up to 100%, and I could have gone bigger, a little bit bigger, probably like 250, which would have been to there. But I figured, you know what? That's good enough. I'll have a little octopus family with, the baby and then the parents. But okay, enough of that. The point is, it's a really fun model. I got to print really well using an older version of Cura. Obviously, if you're curious, I will try and do my best to put the profile, and if not the profile, the settings that I used down in the description. So if anybody wants to give it a try, they can. My main thing with Cura 3.6 is it's stable, it has what I need, and that's that. And quite honestly, I might upgrade in the future, but I might not. And as all the old people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Point is, if you got a slicer that works, don't go downloading the latest version. It might cause you more headache than it's worth. So, hope you found this an informative and interesting and not too rambling episode of Make It with Galvin. I pretty much just dumped my brain out here because I felt like this was a topic worth covering. Hopefully it saves a few of you some headaches. I'll see you here next time.